Welcome to Real Learning with Real People, where we learn from authentic and remarkable people in order to enhance the lives of our listeners. I'm Ken King, and I truly appreciate you joining me to learn today. This show was created in order to learn from and connect with people who have great lessons and stories that will positively impact listeners from all walks of life. In these unscripted conversations, we dive into the upbringing of our guests in order to really gain an understanding of their framework for life and who they are. Then we walk alongside them as they show us how that framework has impacted them in what they do. This is intentional because when we understand that who we are and what we do are different, we can really start to see how they are connected to performance, learning, creativity, and inclusivity. Now let's jump in as we chase some real learning from some real people. In this episode, we talk with Team Canada Volleyball Alumni, founder of Ready in 5 Incorporated, and founder of Volley IQ, Jessie Niles. Jessie's volleyball career took her to the University of Alberta, but has now taken her all the way around the world as a member of Team Canada and while playing professionally. Jessie's volleyball life, though, is just a part of her, not who she is completely, and we discuss that in depth during this conversation. Throughout, we discuss her transition from post-secondary and professional athlete life to a more quote-unquote typical lifestyle that has its own challenges. In this conversation, Jessie stays super real and raw with us, and I appreciate her so much for being one of the most authentic people that I've ever had on the show. Here's my conversation with founder of Ready in 5 and Volley IQ, Jessie Niles. Hi, Jessie. How are you today?
Hi, I'm doing really well. How about you?
I'm good, and anybody who's listened to the show before knows that the fake hello at the beginning is something I talk about all the time and hate doing, and I just haven't had a chance to weasel in a way that's a little bit more natural and fitting. I think I just need to hit record when the call starts, and then we just can edit it afterwards.
Yeah, no, that's sorry, my internet just cut out, so there's a hot start. But there you go for a natural introduction. But I'm thrilled to be able to chat with you today. So thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, no problem. So where in the world are you?
So right now I am in a small town in eastern Slovakia called Michalovce. So it's about 30 kilometers from the Ukrainian border.
And what's the weather like right now?
You know, the weather's been pretty good. It's getting pretty gray these days, and the sun starts to set around 4-ish. So the days are short, but not too cold, not like where you're at right now in Canada. So I certainly can't complain.
And so what's the name of the team or the program that you're playing with right now?
So I actually just retired from the national team come August. So my professional sports career for myself has come to an end, but I'm here. He's actually a professional hockey player, so he's playing in the Slovak league here. And I'll be starting my master's in January, which I can luckily do from a distance. So as long as I've got my laptop and a computer, I can be anywhere in the world, which is great.
This is the time to start the distance masters because everybody's doing distance learning.
Yeah, exactly.
So I like to start out by getting a little bit of a vibe for what things were like growing up, what your family situation was like, as much or as little detail as possible, and then we'll really use that as a bit of a framework to see how you got to where you're at and what your experiences were like after that. But first, I just want to know a little bit about what childhood was like, what your family structure was, all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, well, I look back on my childhood very fondly. So I grew up with my parents, Chris and Allison, and then my younger brother, who's 2 years younger than me, Isaac. So I was originally born in Ontario and then headed out west to small town Alberta, Turner Valley, Alberta, pretty early on. And we moved there in the year 2000. So I grew up in a small town setting. I was, out and about playing outside most days and hanging out with my little bro and all of our animals. So I really grew up with the freedom to kind of explore and do things that I enjoyed doing. So I feel really lucky because my parents made a lot of sacrifices to not give me the opportunities, but to support kind of the opportunities that I wanted to pursue. And so my mom, she's a school principal, and my dad's an executive coach. So they're both in a line of work that, they really support people, support students, executives to really be their best. So it was really, I couldn't ask for a better set of parents when it comes to,
That's awesome. And I'm going to draw some lines probably between the amount of leadership that your parents have in their lives and then you pursuing some of the things that you've pursued and that kind of thing probably throughout the conversation. But I ask just about everybody who's on the show to try and describe each of their parents using one word. So I'm curious what you would use.
Oh, that's a really good question. I think for my mom, I would say, oh, that's really tough. They were putting me on the spot. It's hard to just pick one word, but
I've had a few people tell me how unfair this question actually is, but I keep it anyway.
Maybe you can cut out the big giant pauses while I think here. I think for my dad, so I actually work really closely with my dad. I work with him day to day right now. So for me, one word that pops up is mentor, and he's been a huge mentor in my life in various capacities when it comes to sports, when it comes to business and career. So I would describe him as a mentor. And then for my mom, I can't think of a better word other than joy. Like, she just is such for me, just such a sense of joy and fun and lightness. So I think I get a lot of that from her.
That's perfect. And it's a tough question, especially on the spot, but it's also like there's no wrong response or right response. So it's supposed to just catch exactly what you kind of think of when you think of them, and that's perfect. And so when we talk about the leadership that they both have in their professional lives, and then the fact that they, especially with your dad, clearly coach and have led you through your personal and professional life, and then that combination of joy, I would imagine that served you quite well, because you don't go as far as you've gone, especially in your field, unless you have some of that kind of push for excellence combined with that level of enjoyment. So I'm wondering, first, were you a multi-sport athlete growing up?
I was here and there. And nothing ever came quite close to volleyball. We lived pretty far out in the country, so a drive to practice or to games was anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour and a half. So there was only so many hours in the day, but I did in high school, run track and do track and field, and was into distance running as well. So those were kind of secondary though to volleyball.
Yeah. And was it, as you started to specialize, as you started to really focus and hone in on volleyball, was that because you were best at it, or was that because you enjoyed it the most, or some combination?
Yeah, just as I've retired, I've really been reflecting back on my volleyball career. And one thing that the reason that I started playing volleyball and really stuck with it was because of the connections. I really loved playing because I had a great group of like-minded teammates and friends who I got to, work towards this common goal with. So I was certainly, never the best. And, but because I loved being at practice and training with my teammates, that joy was always there. So I stuck with it.
So how did you know you were not always the best? Because at some point, so the reason why I asked the question, well, I give you a chance to think of your answer, is because a lot of times we really see ourselves as kind of being imposters or being a fraud or not deserving to be somewhere. And then you have achieved this level where clearly you do deserve it. And at some point it just becomes undeniable to even yourself that you should be in a certain position because you kind of accept that you have the right, the quote unquote right to be there. So I'm curious, what made you feel like you weren't as good as others early on?
You know, I don't know if it was as much early on because I wasn't too focused on, I don't think, at least thinking back, comparing myself to others. Like I had mentioned, like I almost enjoyed practice more than games. But as I became more competitive, later in the high school and through university and national team, I think what makes many athletes great at what they do is that they're naturally very analytical and analysts. And so you're always, evaluating your own game, your team's game, and, picking apart where you can be better and envisioning kind of what that next step looks like. So you're never satisfied necessarily with where you're at, which is a double-edged sword because, sometimes you miss some of the great things, but it also, it's that, I think, mindset, that analytical mindset that pushes you to be better. But one thing, I just kind of realized on my way out the door from my national team career here is that, as a younger athlete, I was always striving to be like somebody else or to play like somebody else. And, if I could, just get to their level, then I'll maybe be the best. And what I've really started to realize is that you take inspiration, whether it's from teammates or coaches, sports, wherever it is, and really build that into your own personal identity and you as a player. And so I think there's not going to be any one best person at one thing, but you really, you can be a great team sport athlete and be very independent and, have, your own brand, your own things that make you special. So early on, I kept trying to be like other people, and it wasn't until I really accepted and was committed to acting and playing my sport in the true Jessie Niles way that I really felt kind of at one with where I was at and where I wanted to go.
Interesting. And so it sounds to me like you really transitioned from that comparison of yourself to others to comparison of yourself to yourself, and really using your own standards as a measuring stick to continue to improve. And probably not coincidentally, that coincides with the time that your career really started to take off.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a good summary of it.
I'm curious if you have had any moments as you've gotten into more of your adult career, so post-secondary and professional career, national career, did you kind of go through a second phase of comparing yourself to others that was either useful or not useful to you, or was it just did that just not really come back? It was always about your own standards?
No, I think constantly it has been a battle. I think it's human nature. You're always kind of measuring yourself against the people around you. So it's not like it went away, but I guess I just started to think about more how much weight I was giving those comparisons. And the one kind of example that stands out to you, I had the pleasure of working with Tom Black, who is the national team coach this past summer. And so, I've learned many things from him, and we would work together and be reviewing video quite often together. And he would be showing me examples of some incredible international liberos and just, using it as a teaching tool for me to learn and look at their technique and their decision-making. And so this was really valuable. And we were watching these montages of these incredible athletes playing. And, I'm thinking in my head, whoa, I don't know if I can ever be like them. And I remember we got down to the Olympic qualifier this past January 2020. We were down in the Dominican Republic, and it's a couple of days before the official start of the competition. And there's a lot of pieces that go into this story, but part of which is I hurt my back. I herniated a disc. So I was just kind of being held together by Band-Aids here, and just mentally just trying to hold it together so I can be the best I can for this Olympic qualifier. But one practice, I was just not playing well, I was pretty overcome by emotion. And so Tom and I sit down after, and I said, Tom, like we get talking, and Tom, like I really, I don't know if I can do this. Like and I was just really lacking some confidence. And so Tom pulled up his computer, and instead of showing me all the great things that these incredible international athletes are doing, he showed me a montage of a bunch of their mistakes. And what it really he was highlighting to me is that, they're human too, and they make, mistakes just like you do. And so in this comparison to others, I wasn't fairly comparing myself. I was not taking a look at the full picture. So that's just one lesson that I, learned just less than a year ago of I think it's great to get inspiration and learn from other people, but to kind of make sure you've got the whole picture before, kicking yourself down and feeling like, oh, I can never do what they do, because, you can, and they're going to make mistakes just like you, and they're human. So
I want to take a quick break to recognize that Real Learning with Real People is brought to you by the Boost Institute, which is a branch of Boost Innovation Incorporated. You can visit the Boost Institute at boostinstitute.ca or check out Boost Innovation at www.boostinnovation.io. Now back to our chat with Jessie. Yeah, we see so much of that in all walks of the work that we do, but in sport especially, it becomes really highlighted where we see that concern with the other being something that really puts limitations on what we can and can't do. And it has nothing to do with our own capability. It just completely has to do with almost a distraction of either others' capabilities or others' thoughts and opinions. And
absolutely.
I wonder how much you've battled, because I've watched some video of your play, and you're a pretty emotional player. You play, I would describe you as playing a little bit with your heart on your sleeve. Like, you play hard, and I think the position also requires a bit of that. But I think that's a good thing. And I'm wondering if that emotion or that kind of that passion has ever had a shadow to it that's challenging for you. So you kind of alluded to it there, where there's just a little bit of self-doubt, but I find when somebody has that ability to really, really commit their entire self to something, that sometimes they can really beat themselves up too. Is that something that you've experienced?
Absolutely. I, during my time as an athlete, and I still carry that identity in a different context, I guess, today, but I really pour my whole heart and soul 100% into it, and, make a lot of sacrifices. I did make a lot of sacrifices to kind of be the athlete, and it's well informed, and I was totally willing to do that. But by pouring kind of 100% of my being into, being the best athlete I could be, and also, supporting my team to be the best team that we could be, it did feel heavy at times. And I think, a lot of that came to a head just over a year ago, when I headed into my final pro season in France. And, I had this rosy picture in my mind. I'm finally going to a league where, it's one of the better leagues in Europe. And I finally have this opportunity to play there, and just really painted this picture and idea in my head. And when I arrived, I myself as a player, I was not in the place where I wanted to be or expected to be when I arrived. And this, I think, I was just totally burnt out. I did not allow myself a chance to emotionally kind of recover for 4 years straight. I went from one pro season into the national team, and like any great athlete, just poured everything in I could, and was always striving to get better. But I just did not set aside time to take care of myself, because I was always in my mind kind of putting what's going to be best for my team and what's going to be best for Jessie as an athlete, and not necessarily as a human. And so I've now come to realize as I've retired that being an athlete is, taking a holistic approach into being an athlete is going to be, better for you and your team ultimately in the long run. So, yeah.
It sounds like you're, and this is to be expected. And I think it's really good to hear. It sounds like you're still kind of working through that and pulling apart some of those threads and dissecting a little bit of your career. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I've been really thankful because during these past couple months, and I mean, it was of course not the summer that anyone expected. All of our final competitions, our competitions were canceled. So I went from, trying to heal my back to be able to compete at the Volley Nations League, which we had qualified for, and kind of have my last hurrah with the national team. Went from preparing for that to nothing. So it was a bit of an underwhelming way out the door, but it definitely has given me a lot of time to reflect and work through, my feelings and thoughts around my career. And I've been thankful to have the support of my teammates and the national team game plan. And so I've been really fortunate to have resources to reach out to help me with this process. But it's definitely, I don't think it's an easy transition for any athletes, especially, I've been dedicating the past, 15 years of my life to it, and it's kind of been core to who I am. So it's something to work through, but at the same time, it's so incredibly exciting to me because I just cannot wait to take my experiences as an athlete and, spread them throughout the world, outside of sports. And so to me, that part's also really exciting.
And you bring up a thought for me, and it's the idea of, do you identify as a volleyball player or professional athlete, or do you identify as somebody who plays volleyball, a person who plays volleyball, or somebody who is an athlete as a part of their life?
Yeah, if you asked me maybe a year ago, I would say, yeah, I'm 100%, I'm an athlete. But now coming full circle, I understand, I was a person that was, a really great volleyball player. And, looking back throughout my volleyball career, I was doing a lot of really cool other things other than volleyball as well, which I'm really proud of. And I think, went hand in hand, made me a better volleyball player and vice versa. So I think there was some core characteristics and traits and behaviors that I developed as an athlete that don't show up just in athletics for me.
Yeah. And we see that all the time, where it's a major personal struggle when there's not at least some identification or that separation of identity between being an athlete and being somebody who participates in a sport or competes in a sport. And it's the same thing in careers, where if people retire and all they identified with was being a doctor or a lawyer, we see them get sicker faster. We see their lifespan is shorter. Their mental health is oftentimes a much larger challenge for them. And so one of the things that I and we at the Boost Institute do a lot of work with athletes is really trying to make sure that that's happening sooner rather than later. That separation of self from craft, and making sure that there's a deep understanding of the difference between the two. And with you being in such an important time in your career, but also an important time in your career while there's a very unique world situation or multiple world situations going on, there's something that we've been talking about a lot, which is grief, and the idea that essentially what you're going through when you retire is the stages of grief. And did you feel that, or do you know where you're at in that right now, if you are feeling it?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's definitely a grieving process, and the past year and a bit has been grief, I think, has been a central theme, as much as you wish it's not. This past summer, so it started, I guess, July 2019. My grandfather passed away the day before I left to Russia for our Olympic qualifier. So I was really fortunate. I was able to fly home with, less than 24 hours before hopping on a plane to Russia to say goodbye to him. And, he was still mentally totally with it and said, Jessie, it's been an honor to be your grandfather. And so it's pretty special end to say goodbye to him like that. But that was tough to then turn around and fly to Russia. And, I was playing for him that week. And he was really central in my life. So I'm still grieving his loss too. But also for my family, because he was really central to my family. Sorry. I didn't think I would get emotional about it. But so kind of that grief started there. And sorry, I just got to take 1 minute. But with that, I really struggled it kind of was a point in my life where I just realized that I needed to take care of, Jessie outside of an athlete as well. And it's hard to come to terms with that, because I think that's where the grief of Jessie as an athlete started a little bit, of that athletic identity. And my family is so incredibly important to me. And so I couldn't pour 100%, or I wasn't willing to make all of the sacrifices that I knew that I wanted to or needed to be the best athlete and be there for the national team as much as I wanted. So I was kind of ready to move on and commit to, I wanted to spend more time with my family. And, that my grandfather passing away really, I think, started this process of realization that I just hadn't been spending enough time with my family, or enough time that I wanted to. So that's a big sacrifice as an international athlete that you make. You're moving around the world, and maybe you only see your family for 1 or 2 weeks of summer, and then you're living across the world for 8 months. So around grief, that's when it started, about a year and a half ago, of a theme of grief in my life. And then, of course, I herniated a disc in my back, just into my final pro season. And so, grieving this great idea of what I thought pro was going to be like, playing in France, and then of course, grieving what I thought things would be. And it's interesting, as I'm talking here, I'm grieving things. Some things that I'm grieving are stories that I've told myself, and maybe those are goals, or things that I wish for myself. And so when reality doesn't line up with that, it can be tough to come to terms with. And I think that's something as an athlete that's true, but across, no matter what it is you're doing or where you're at in life, I think it's probably true across the board.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that so authentically. You talked about at the beginning of the call how you were going to do your best to show up and be as authentic as possible, and you did that.
Yeah.
And it's important, because and just off sharing that way and being willing to talk about it and share it so raw is important, because you're far from the only person to experience a variety of emotions as an athlete, that things that come at you from the outside, sometimes in your control, sometimes not in your control. And I think that there's, when you think about grief, and there's so many different versions of, but the stages are pretty similar for everyone. And sounds like you definitely are very much at a point where you're reflecting back, and it sounds a lot more like you're accepting what is and what isn't in your control. And the way that you speak about it has a lot more of appreciation than it does and correct me if I'm wrong, than it does like anger or denial or anything like that. Did you over the past year, especially, did you find that there was any moments where you kind of bounced back and forth, where you weren't so sure maybe about not playing, or you weren't so sure what you wanted, and there was a little bit more kind of bargaining either with yourself, maybe bargaining with your injury, maybe kind of being in denial of like, oh, it's not the situation isn't what it is, anything like that?
Yeah, there definitely. So for me, there was a point where I knew I was done volleyball, and so I kind of made that decision in my head and closed that door. But in terms of what comes next and figuring that out, and I kind of jump into a couple things and keep myself busy. So maybe as a way to not have to think about it. But the bargaining came between deciding, amidst so much uncertainty of what was going on, is, okay, what am I going to really, pour myself into? And so I found myself kind of dabbling in a couple different things all at once, and stressing myself out because I, signed myself up for a bunch of different things. So, but I really, made a decision to stop playing, but I did feel it was tough because I cared about my team, and I cared about, I really continued to play, and play on the national team because I really felt that I was representing and a reflection of all the people that came before me, my coaches, my parents, and I really wanted to make them proud. And so that part, it was tough as well to say, okay, like it's, I'm stopping. So.
Why did you want to play volleyball at such a high level in the first place?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because I didn't, grow up saying, oh, I want to be a professional volleyball player. And so I even, as I finished high school, I didn't know. I knew a little bit about people playing, varsity sports. So, some of my friends were, so I was like, oh, maybe this is something I want to do as well. And so I thought, well, if I want to do this, I might as well, do it as best as I can be. So I'll try and go to the best school that I can, and for best for sports and best for academics. And then I got into university, and, I was really fortunate to have an amazing coach, Lori Eisler, up at U of A in Edmonton. And a couple years into varsity, Lori says, you should consider trying out for the junior national team. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't really know that was a thing, but sure, like, let's go give it a whirl. And if I go to tryouts, I might as well, try as hard as I can and and be the best I can be. And then, so it was this kind of constant theme of, I think I got very lucky to be surrounded by people who encouraged me to kind of take those next steps. And, in my childhood, that was my parents and, teachers and that sort of stuff. And then I get into more formal volleyball settings. And I've just been really lucky to have just a string of incredible coaches who have encouraged me to keep going. And so I think on my end, if I'm going to be doing something and pouring my heart and energy, like you said earlier, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I really, go 100% into whatever I'm doing, whether it's, scrubbing the floors at home, they're going to be so clean, or playing professional playing sports. Like I have this desire to just do it the best that I can. And so, that's a good thing for achieving a high level of sport, but it's also, it takes a lot of energy, which is great. And I'm totally willing to pour that in, but I'm not somebody that typically sits on the couch very long and watches Netflix. I'll tell you that. So nothing wrong with that. I just can't sit still.
No, that doesn't surprise me even a little bit. It's interesting though to hear you talk about it from that perspective, because when we talk, coming back to the idea of grieving the different stages of it, especially when we talk about the professional side, having that deep connection to why you did it in the first place can really change how you're approaching it as you leave a situation at any part of your life. So for example, as you navigate the unknown of the current world, and not just because of your retirement, but also because of everything that's going on, I would imagine that there's a lot of crossover that you'll be able to identify between why you wanted to continue doing volleyball in the first place and why you now are going to be able to have success and be passionate about other things, because there's crossover there. And things that maybe felt like they were just volleyball things that quickly become things that you can get excited about and get passionate about, and put that same kind of energy and effort in, besides floor scrubbing, that that are really impactful for you and that give you purpose. And I think that you're probably seeing some of those now, just in terms of some of the things that you're getting involved in. So I think that there's probably some of those moments where you're identifying some of those reasons why you enjoyed and why you wanted to be great in volleyball, and now those are things that you're able to carry into other areas of your life now that are not volleyball based. And I'm curious about if you've identified some of those and what they are and why you're so into them.
Absolutely. I've definitely, in this reflection process over the past couple of months, I've noticed some of those pieces that you mentioned. And so, just a couple off the top of my head, I was really struggling with why I loved to play national team, but I wasn't loving playing pro. I'm playing volleyball with a team, and it's the same game. So why do I love playing national team, but I don't love playing professionally? And I realized that my relationship with the game, in those two different settings was different. With national team, I was representing my country. I was doing it for the joy of it. And, I had a group of very driven, like-minded women and, staff working towards the same goal. But then when it came to playing professionally, it was my job and I was doing it for money. And so were all of my teammates, and there was a lot less emphasis on this common goal. Like it was, a lot of the time, to put it bluntly, it was, make the sponsors happy, and, if you don't lose these, or if you don't win these next couple games, it's the same game, but very different drives between very different, reasons why. So that was kind of one realization. And so for me, a lesson from recognizing that is now in my post-sports career is I am very committed to being part of a network and a community of like-minded people who inspire me, and who, hopefully I can inspire as well. But I just love that and purpose, driving an entire group of people forward. So I'm really going to be looking to build that in, continue to have that as a central theme in my life. So I think, that would be one example of what you're talking about there.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Ready in 5.
That would be great. I would love to share.
So share a little bit about, I guess, the mission and purpose of Ready in 5, and what you're hoping to accomplish in co-founding that.
Yeah, absolutely. So through this reflection process that we've been, chatting about, through this, I really have recognized in myself what I'm really passionate about, and a sense of purpose. And so I've come to identify in myself that I really love to be creative and innovate in new ways that I can use different tools and technology to support the people around me to achieve their best. And so, as an athlete, I would become involved, in university, I was on the athletics board, really supporting how can I support student athletes. And this past summer, I was involved with a game plan initiative. So that's an organization that supports national team athletes. And So I led an initiative there to involve, to get more athletes involved in accessing the free resources through this organization. So where I felt most passionate is when I have been working to, support the people around me to achieve their best and to, get to where they want to be. So after I recognized this in myself, I wanted to really build something of my own to build a community around this concept. And so through the summer, like most of us, all the training was canceled. Everybody's working from home, training from home. And I was sitting at my desk, working away at all my different busy projects. And I was just totally glued to my chair and, not moving nearly as much as I was before, especially as a national team athlete. And so it was this constant battle of me feeling the pressure, I need to get stuff done, but also me feeling the pressure, I need to be moving around more and, getting exercise. So I started this little experiment with myself where, everybody's got a Fitbit or whatever that buzzes your wrist and tells you to get up and move. But I always ignore my Fitbit. Like I can feel it buzzing on my wrist and I'm just like, okay, get this off. Like I know I should be moving, but I need to finish this email. So I kind of realized there's no way I'm the only person battling with this, especially right now. Everyone's working from home. And so I wanted to figure out a way where I could support people to get moving more and to also do some of their best work. And the great thing is that when you move more, I'm preaching to the choir, but exercise and movement really, it prepares your brain to be at its best and to perform well. So it's a total win-win. So that's where that one need, that challenge that I was aiming to solve through Ready in 5, and that's where it stemmed from. And on the flip side, also as an athlete, I knew how hard it could be to find meaningful work when you are moving from one city to the next every couple months, and it can be hard for employers sometimes. I think a lot of employers are coming around, but some employers don't recognize the value of athletes or are willing to make some of those accommodations for an athlete training schedule. So I wanted to provide a way for athletes to really get meaningful work no matter where in the world they were. And so bringing these two amazing concepts together, these challenges together, I came up with Ready in 5. And so Ready in 5 is a service that's delivered fully online, fully virtually, and high performance athletes lead our customers in online meetings through 5 minutes of movement, really to prepare them to be at their best, not only during the meeting, but after as well. So that is Ready in 5, where it started and what it is. So
yeah, we're going to have to find a way to work together, I think, on the Ready in 5 front for sure. As I was looking it up in preparation for today, and then thinking about the amount of stuff that we do online and the amount, even just stuff like this, right? Like I'm probably like you're a much more elite athlete than I am, but probably like you, I'm already at like that 45-minute mark. I start to get a little antsy and start wanting that little bit of movement, and I definitely think that we should be looking at finding a way to do something together in the near future.
Absolutely. I would love that. Cool stuff. Yeah, absolutely. No, I really admire a lot of the work that the Boost Institute has done, and I think the cool part about Ready in 5 is that it's not about exercising. It's not just about getting a workout in. It's actually we call it the Ready in 5 experience, but it's really pairing movement with a big idea. So with each session, our athletes deliver a big idea and plant a seed with our customers, with the participants in the meeting, a way to inspire them and, to be more effective online, but also in their life. And so I think there's so many great lessons that you've identified and your team at Boost that would, there's so many synergies. So it's really exciting. And I'd love to think about what that could look like down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we do love our partnerships. We got a bunch of partnerships, and that's one of the things that has helped us build such strong relationships with both our clients and the public and some partners as they come in new, just because we at least can show that people like working with us, and they continue to like working with us. So it's advantageous to show that somebody besides us enjoys us.
Absolutely.
So this is like, as you go into business, it's a risk, and risk is something that I think athletes are a little bit more comfortable with than maybe the general population is. Entrepreneurs are definitely more comfortable with it, just because we understand that the odds are against us. It's like 80 or 90 or whatever percentage of businesses fail. So when you're essentially just a crazy person by starting a business. And so welcome to the world of crazy people. And we take those risks, and we're through sport and through our life experience, we're coached to take calculated risk. And in order to do that, you have to have a very particular mindset or a pretty clear internal system of how to approach things that are not guaranteed or unknown. And for some, that's breathing exercises, meditation. For some, it's journaling. And not coincidentally, these are all great mental health practices as well. But it's I think we all have our little processes that help us to take on these risks differently. Now, something tells me that you're a list person. I feel.
Oh man, you can read my mind. Absolutely.
And so I just throw the shot in the dark on the list thing. But lists, what else do you use when you're trying to plan and prepare?
Yeah. So, I'm just kind of at the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. And so just like I learned on the volleyball court, how to deal with those risks and those pressures and those unknowns, not knowing, are we going to win? Are we going to qualify? Those types of things. It's kind of the same drill here now in a business context as an entrepreneur. So, I'm still learning and I'm still experimenting. Absolutely. And there have been many nights, I'm sure you can relate, where you just either you can't get to sleep or you wake up in the middle of the night and the hamster wheel's just going, and you just you got to figure out how to how to process kind of those feelings. And so one thing that I've started doing, I find myself coming up with all these streams of thoughts, and I think that's what sometimes keeps me up at night or wakes me up in the middle of the night is my brain trying to not forget all of these great ideas that it's coming up with, or, these messages. And so what I've started doing is when this comes up, whether it's in the middle of the night or I'm out walking my dog, is I actually do voice to text on my phone and just capture all of these things. And I've been doing this for about 2 months now, and it's crazy how well it's actually worked for me. And I know it kind of comes down to a physiological thing where, now that my brain knows that it's captured somewhere, it can kind of stop thinking about it less. But really just, I'll be walking outside in the park with my dog and just be talking away to my phone and creating these massive long monologues on my iPhone notes. But it's helped me to capture some of my thoughts, and then, I'll go back and organize them and put them into whatever silo they belong into. But that's been a tool and a technique that's helped me lately.
Cool. And yeah, I definitely have many of the same experiences, and I go old school and write it out. Largely because I caught myself sometimes trying to text those thoughts while driving. And then when I look back at the description later, it was just not capturing at all what I was trying to say, but I wasn't looking at it because I was driving. And so I started just getting in the habit of either, if I'm driving, and pulling over and writing it down. And that's why I've got a couple people that call just the same thing I'm taking notes on while we talk. Just the book of Ken is what a lot of people have, because it just goes with me everywhere to everything. And what about breathing? Do you practice anything breathing wise or mindfulness wise, or is that a bit new for you?
No, absolutely. Breathing and mindfulness and meditation was absolutely central to my time as an athlete, and where it really came into to help me was one summer, a couple summers ago, we had a really, really tough coach, and the pressure was totally on. So I was kind of forced into figuring out ways that I'm going to be dealing with pressure and tough situations. And so it was at that point that I really turned to mindfulness and meditation, and working it into a daily, my daily practice when it came to athletics. And so I had, I would wake up every morning and work it into my routine. And one thing that I've, now that I haven't been in my routine as an athlete, I found that I've got out of my same routine of mindfulness or some of that meditation practice that I used when I was an athlete. But that being said, I have been doing, as we've been in lockdowns here, doing some yoga, videos at home and stuff like that. So I've been working it in the mindfulness and some of these meditations into some of my physical movements. So it's looking a little bit different than how I've used it in the past. But it is really amazing that it's in a different context, but it has the same effect. So I could be having a really tough day and taking the time to really, sit down and giving myself the space to just be. It's the same technique that I use in my sport, and I can use it now, and it has the same kind of powerful grounding effect.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if you meant for this to be as deep as it was, but that statement of just give yourself the freedom and the space to just be, right? I just am right now. And I was going to say, if having played for, like, Tom Black's kind of a bit of a growth mindset and mindfulness guru, and I would have been shocked if there wasn't some of that built into your practice from playing under him. And him and I actually met, I guess it was about 5. He probably doesn't remember this, so if he ends up listening to this, he's gonna think I have no idea who this guy is. But we met, I think 6 years ago. He was still at Loyola Marymount then, and I find that when both in my time as a coach and then for athletes and in feedback, I found that there's been a lot of kind of shock at how big an impact that kind of stuff can have. So I'm curious, did you take that's as a skill from volleyball, or was it something that you were already doing? And whenever you kind of built it into your practice, did you notice how big a change it made?
Yeah, it definitely, there comes a point as an athlete where you're working out, but it's not like you're getting a ton, stronger, or you're not, physically you are, you're kind of a little bit out of a plateau, right? You're not going to grow any taller. You have some physical limitations. And so once you reach that point in your career, I think you're forced to realize that to get better, you have to look outside the traditional box of, you're already spending 3 hours in the gym. Like, it just doesn't make sense to spend more and more time. Like, there's got to be this whole 80-20 principle. Like, am I going to get the most bang for my buck? And so recognizing that being an athlete or a human, it's holistic. So you need to take a look at some of these other areas. So just like nutrition and strength training and on-court tactical training. I've started a new business called Volley IQ, where we take a look at video analysis in volleyball and in sport. So that's another area. But then, of course, mindfulness is one of those. It's one of those key areas that if you want to continue to improve as an athlete or grow and evolve, I suppose, that's incredibly important. And for me, it was really helpful. The use of meditation and mindfulness was helpful to me to remove some of that emotion from the game and kind of separate my identity from it a little bit, if that makes sense. Like, I was always kind of beating myself up if I didn't play well or things didn't go as I wanted. But it helped me to take a more of an analytical approach to it and recognize when I was having these emotional responses, which are totally fine and valid, but recognizing that and then be able to turn into more analytical and kind of diving into that side of the game as opposed to feeling like it's all about me or whatever. So that was helpful. And yeah.
Yeah, we actually do a lot of work. We're working with a university volleyball team right now on just those physical feelings and then the emotional feelings that come along with them, and using your breath as a way to take control of them and essentially use them as a power for good instead of internal evil, and really trying to make it something that's a positive for you, and not trying to stop the feelings. Because I think, and I'm sure you can relate to this when you're as a passionate athlete, is that when you have these feelings come up, there's almost a stage in your career where you're just trying to make the feelings stop, which is not the most realistic thing in the world in terms of an approach, as opposed to just trying to use them, direct them, and guide them in a way that can actually serve you well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's recognizing that it's not a question of stomping them down, but just being at peace with them. And so that was, a really powerful tool, that breath work. And I mean, even in the most high pressure situations, Tom, you had mentioned, it definitely, mindfulness was a huge piece of our training. And so one really impactful thing that Tom taught me was, in volleyball, you're in a passing lineup to start the play. And so he taught me the actual physical act. You step up to the passing lineup and you take a big, deep breath for, a multitude of reasons. But it was just kind of this action of stepping up to the plate and preparing your mind, preparing your body to, just like a baseball batter, hits the ball out. I'm doing the same thing on the volleyball court. I'm stepping up to the plate and getting ready to go. So, during games, before games, after games, I really has been a useful tool to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll do this to you one more time, and I'll cut it out if it's awkward and you don't know who I'm talking about. But I feel like Talbot Walton's closer to your circles than some of the other people. Do you know that name?
I don't. I'm sorry.
So he's the women's volleyball coach at Red Deer College.
Okay,
Big, tall, lanky guy.
Talbot. Yeah, so I definitely know who he is, but again, haven't had a chance to really connect.
Yeah, so luckily, again, not super relevant to the story, other than the fact that when I met Tom, we went down to the States. He was still with USA Volleyball at the time, and not being a volleyball guy, and my volleyball friends hate this story. It embarrasses them, and the people I went with were all volleyball people, so they were also quite embarrassed. I didn't know who Coach Cry was, so. And I quickly learned, and as I found out who he was and did more research and learned more about the guy, I was like blown away by his accomplishments as an athlete and as a coach, and his pedagogical stuff that he's got that he's teaching people in all sports. But we're observing and learning in one of the USA women's practices, and Coach Cry comes over, and he's like, "Hey, do you mind being a catcher in this drill?" And I was like, no, I have no idea what that is. Like, I'm a basketball guy. I'm sorry. And so the coach that I just mentioned comes over and gives me the dirtiest look. And he's like, "You catch the ball, Ken. You catch the ball and you put it in the bin." That's all. He was so offended that I had just kind of like spurned Coach Cry. I realized after that I'd essentially spurned Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky, and that it was obviously devastating to him that I had just kind of been like, "No, man, I can't do that. I don't know what you're talking about."
That's too funny.
Yeah. Not my proudest moment. Meeting somebody who's a very, very big deal, especially in the volleyball world, but in all sport. Now, before I wrap up, I want to give you an opportunity to direct people, one, to follow you, like where people can go to follow you, but also where they can go to follow some of the projects that you're just starting and working on, or some of the things that are near and dear to your heart. So websites or socials or anything like that.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I'd love, I'd love to connect with people who either, some of the stuff that I'm working on hits home with them. And so just always looking to connect. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Jessie Niles, on Instagram, Jessie Niles, or on Facebook as well. And then for my business, Ready in 5, you can find us on our website, www.getreadyin5.com. And then I had briefly mentioned I'm working on a volleyball specific business called Volley IQ, which uses video as a tool to help volleyball athletes to improve. So you can find us also on the internet at www.volleyiq.ca.
Perfect. And what's kind of your personal development tool? Like, do you have books or podcast, obviously, besides how closely you listen to and follow ours, that you listen to or read?
Yeah, I have an approach that spans like a bunch of different modalities. So I love reading, and I've used audiobooks. So I love to walk outside and listen to audiobooks and podcasts. And then I love doing LinkedIn learning courses or courses online as a good way to just to build my skill set. So those would be some of the tools that I'm currently using. So are you looking for specific recommendations on some stuff to read?
Yeah, like I'm going to open my Amazon cart and I'm going to add something from you.
Okay. Yeah,
No pressure.
One book I'll tell you right now, it's not necessarily a huge page turner, but it has so much incredible information. You've probably heard of it, but Thinking Fast and Slow. And for me, it's just it has so much information in, and now the challenge, I've read it, I've made a bunch of notes on it. It's like, now how do I put all of this into practice? Like, what do I do with this, and how do I translate it, this information into my life and use it? So I would definitely recommend everybody taking a read through that. Have you read it?
Oh yeah, I've read it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's very good.
Probably a couple passes through for sure.
Yeah, no, totally. And I agree with you that it's got a lot in there, and it's one of those ones that I can see how if it is an audiobook format, it would be super useful, because it's one that you want to take notes from.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I went through and highlighted a bunch of stuff. So, but yeah, I'm just trying to think. I mean, I don't know if I can think of anything else off the top of my head right now. I've been reading a lot of different stuff here and there. So I don't necessarily say I have one. I'll get back to you on that, though. You might want to edit this part out. Oh man.
That's okay. It's supposed to be real. That's why the title is what it is.
Okay.
I have one for you that I just got, and I literally, like, I have a favorite bookstore, because that's how cool I am. But and it's actually in Canmore, Alberta.
Awesome.
And I just got this book called "This Is Your Brain on Music."
Ooh.
And it's the science of human obsession. And yeah, it's just a different, some of the stuff is definitely off of some other books, and there's going to be some crossover there for sure. And having played for Tom, I'm sure you're familiar with Dweck's mindset stuff and all that kind of work. And so there's definitely some of that in there, but then it's, as somebody who really, really likes music and really has always been curious about the play that it has in human performance. I just grabbed the book off the title, and I'm enjoying it so far. I'm not done it, so maybe it could take a turn for the worse and I might not like it in the end, but so far it's pretty good.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. I definitely will pick it up and give it a read. I would love to. So that actually reminds me of a book that I've just started getting into that is along the same lines, but Spark by John Rady. I'm sure you've read that as well, but that's, I mean, there's been a ton of information there that I really has driven my work with Ready in 5. So that would definitely be one that I haven't read it cover to cover yet, but I'm working through it. So, and I think there's probably a lot of parallels with the book, This Is Your Brain on Music. So I'll pick that one up as well.
Well, and Rady actually has, the book Spark and some of his other work, he's really inspired a lot of kind of our fundamental foundations of where we build some of our content around. So one of the lines that he shares, I think it was in Spark, but it may have been in one of his other works. I can't be sure off the top of my head, but it was the idea that we are eaters, sleepers. I'm trying to remember it for sure. We are eaters, movers, players, and sleepers. And we have to take care of all those things. And above all those things is our connection to others, because nothing gives us a higher psychological release due to the amount of oxytocin and all that kind of stuff that we get from it. So we have to take care of our proper eating, our proper moving, our proper amount of play and enjoyment and sleep. But we have to connect to others because it gives us more oxytocin than like smoking or prescription drugs or even exercise. Just making sure that we connect to others so much. And it's interesting in current times because it's like, you definitely don't get that same amount of connection oxytocin from Zoom calls. And as we see everybody's really struggling, it's that connection with others that can really make a big difference in the lives of people around us and our own life. So I love the Rady stuff.
Absolutely. No, that definitely hits home as I'm sitting in my little hamster cage of an apartment all alone. So I definitely, I'm sure like many, craving that, get out and that connection again. But I mean, it's also a really interesting time to innovate new ways that we can create that connection. And, now that we're kind of forced to, what else can that look like? So.
Absolutely. We got to send you some like Boost Institute artwork too, or just something for that wall. Cause that's a plain white wall.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I'll get some posters up here.
Well, Jessie, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you so raw and authentically sharing the things that have been difficult recently and before. And I know that's going to connect a lot with people for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of our data you mentioned earlier about us being in Miami, doing some work down there. We're just seeing so many different versions in our data of grief and struggle and how people are coming out of that. So nobody's is ever the same. No grief is ever the same, but you sharing it the way that you shared it today is going to be something that impacts a lot of people for sure, because we know how many people are dealing with different versions of it right now. So the way you showed up is really, it means a lot to me that you committed like that. So thank you so much for giving the time and giving the version of yourself that's really going to make a difference for others.
Yeah, well, it was such a pleasure to sit down and chat with you. And so thank you so much for the opportunity to share some of my story. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to connect with you and your listeners.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk again soon so that we can get a chance to work together a little bit more.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thanks, Ken.
Make sure you subscribe wherever you get podcasts or to this YouTube channel to hear our weekly episodes.